NewJeans is one of the fastest growing music brands in history. In just 2 years, they built a brand worth over $100 million. And it's all because they mastered one thing: knowing how to build cult-like following. In this video, I'm uncovering the genius marketing tactic that made NewJeans an instant phenomenon and how you can use the same strategies to build your cult-like brand. By the way, I'm lucky. I've helped brands generate multi-six figures using marketing strategies. And from the beginning, NewJeans made one decision that changed everything. Picture this, it's 2022, the K-pop industry is already an $8 billion machine, and it had rules. All of the most popular music groups follow the same proven formula. Their music videos are high concepts or heavy on the CGI. The music is mostly EDM, and the choreography are perfectly synchronized. Everybody was going for that extreme maximalist approach because it worked. But on July 22nd, a YouTube video was uploaded and it completely changed everything. NewJeans had just posted the first music video, Attention. There weren't any heavy CGI, the music didn't seem overly produced, and the girls had long black simple hair, just like any other teenagers. The music video itself looked like something you could shoot with your friends over the weekend. And on paper, it shouldn't work. This music video should have flopped. But in reality, NewJeans' first music videos took the world by storm. It was so different from anything you've seen in K-pop. It really feels like a breath of fresh air. And through word of mouth, this video was shared over and over and over again until it went viral and shook up the entire K-pop industry. And this is what you call disruptive marketing. When a brand does something so innovative, it challenges the whole status quo. And that's exactly how NewJeans hijacked your attention. They look at their entire industry and see what's overdone and completely went the opposite direction. But NewJeans already disrupted the industry once, and with their upcoming rebrand, can they do it again? Now that's the question I'll be answering at the end of this video. But the great thing about disruptive marketing is that it can be used in any industry. For smartphones, Apple came in and completely removed the keyboard. How about bottled water? How do you penetrate a market that is so established and boring? You do it by putting water in a beer can, package it as a hardcore energy drink, and you call it liquid death. So if you want to build a brand that people are obsessed with, you need to disrupt the market just like NewJeans, because every industry probably has an overdone formula, and if you follow it, you're probably just gonna blend in. So you gotta think, okay, what's common in my industry and what can I do that's the completely opposite of that and still make it feel natural? But to make it natural, you need something extra, because you can't just be different just for the sake of it. By then, you just be a gimmick. So how does NewJeans time and time again constantly disrupt the market but still make their brand feel authentic? That's because they have this one thing that at the time, a lot of K-pop brands didn't even have, and that's having a singular creative vision. Here's a question. What do you think about when you think of Apple design? You probably think elegant, sleek, minimalistic. Well, did you know it was largely because Steve Jobs, back in his college days, took a calligraphy class and fell in love with the design principles. So it was Steve Jobs' specific taste and interest that made Apple design so iconic. And it's the same for NewJeans, because behind every cult-like brand is the visionary. And for NewJeans, it's Min Hee-jin, the mastermind behind their entire visuals, sound, marketing strategy. Now this woman, I'm not going to go too deep into the controversies or the legal politics around her in this video, but you can't deny there wouldn't be NewJeans without Min Hee-jin. And you only need to look at her Instagram profile to see. You see a lot of these obscure jazz albums, MF Doom, classic Italian music, bossa nova, and that heavily influenced the way NewJeans music is produced. You know how it has a lot of these jazzy, R&B, easy listening flavors. Even the concept of NewJeans came from her study of German philosophy, and I can talk more about that in a moment. So you see, there's a lot of personal influence that Min Hee-jin infuses into the way that NewJeans sounds and NewJeans look. And if the NewJeans brand was brought up by a group of committees like a lot of these K-pop groups are, it wouldn't have the same distinct feel, because these days people don't just follow brands anymore. They follow leaders and visionaries. Even big corporations, they're trying to go for that founder-led approach. You know, that's why Mark Zuckerberg is scrambling to rebrand his image. So if you're trying to build a personal brand for yourself, this is actually an advantage, because instead of trying to stand out by being the best within your niche, you can stand out by leaning into your unique obsessions. It could be pop culture, your hobbies, your values, the philosophy you believe in. And if you combine all of that, you have something called taste. And if you have a unique taste, you can create a lot of these creative marketing concepts. So the worst thing you can do is to outsource your creative vision to some other agency, because if your brand is authentic, it can evolve as you grow over time. And that's how you build a cult-like following for your brand. Now, we already covered the importance of having a unique vision, but the biggest strategy is still coming up. But before we get into that, click subscribe if you enjoy these kind of deep dives. Now remember how I mentioned the concept of NewJeans actually came from German philosophy. In one of her rare interviews, the creative director of NewJeans mentioned that the idea of NewJeans actually came from German philosophy, and it's a thing called Hegel's dialectic. And it's the idea of taking something traditional and something modern and putting them together to create something new that incorporates both elements. And that's exactly what NewJeans is, having something new and something that is timeless. NewJeans. And this remix culture is the backbone of NewJeans branding. From their visuals, they're bringing back these Y2K, early 90s styling, and the sound, it sounds very nostalgic because they're reusing a lot of these 90s beats like New Jack Swing, R&B, Jersey Club, and even the way they do their partnerships. And the most genius partnership they've ever done is their PowerPuff Girl collab. It was so successful they did it twice. And this PowerPuff Girl collab is the best example of how NewJeans combines nostalgia with a modern take. And it works because NewJeans and PowerPuff Girl, they both represent empowerment, youth, and this collab helped them expand their market reach. You know, whether you're Gen Z, Gen Alpha, or you're a millennial growing up on these cartoons. And also, it's a cartoon, so there's a much wider audience. There's a lot of application in terms of merchandise, media. So when you combine everything, it creates a sense of familiarity. And nostalgia marketing is a trend that every founder, every business needs to jump on right now. I mean, even a few years ago, the 80s aesthetic was everywhere. You know, with series like Stranger Things. And nowadays, they're heading towards a Y2K, early 90s kind of look. But the key, you know, isn't just recreating a look or a trend. It's about recreating a feeling, right? Because nostalgia, when you think about it, you feel familiar, you feel safe. And that's the feeling you want to hit. And I actually cover a lot of this in my Sabrina Carpenter brand breakdown, so feel free to check that out. So for your brand, if you want to create something that feels fresh but still has a sense of familiarity, remixing old and new is the fastest way to stand out. It could be bringing back an old trend or recreating a successful campaign that you had. For example, the NBA with their Christmas campaign. Or with NewJeans, they recreate one of their most famous music videos to do an ad for Nike. Or if you want to do something simple, you can just add a vintage frame, VHS overlay, or grainy footage over your videos. But here's the thing. None of this would matter if NewJeans didn't master this final strategy, because this strategy would decide whether their next rebrand as NJZ will succeed or fail. Because from day one, NewJeans wasn't building a brand, they were building an adaptive brand. Adaptive branding means ways in which a brand changes over time to either stay relevant with the market or reflect their journey as a company. And NewJeans does this in two genius ways. The first way is being pretty flexible with their visual branding. You know, unlike a lot of brands out there, NewJeans branding always evolves. Every music videos or promotional material, they feature a variation of their logo. The colors, the branding, the fonts, each version feels pretty distinct and fresh because their brand isn't tied to a specific look. It's more to create a feeling depending on the story that they're trying to tell. If you look at their first music video, they have this hand-drawn logo, which kind of reflects them as, you know, this young group who's coming in with authenticity and trying to disrupt the market. And then you move forward to their Powerpuff Girl areas. So obviously, it's gonna look like a Powerpuff Girl logo. And this is brilliant because a lot of people starting out, they get too focused on getting the right logo out of the gate. But even the biggest brands like Coca-Cola, Starbucks, they change their logo all the time. Because your brand isn't your logo. Your brand is the emotion that people feel when they think of your name. And the second genius way that NewJeans adapts their brand is by looking at other industries. They take notes from literature, fine arts, sports. It could be doing a collab with visual artist Takashi Murakami, or using the story of Cupid and Psyche in their Cool For You music video. And it's the infusion of these cultures, these industries that add layers to their brand, and it makes it interesting. So if you're building your brand, see what you can take from other industries and take it into what you're doing. Because when your brand is always evolving, you're creating an open narrative that allows the audience to tune in. Kind of like watching a TV show, right? Where you want to see what your favorite characters is doing in the next episode. And that is going to drive a lot of brand loyalty. And that's what makes NewJeans still feel so fresh even 3 years into their career. But now, NewJeans is facing their biggest evolution yet. Their next rebrand as NJZ, short for NewJeans. And we've seen some of their teasers. They started out with a hand-drawn logo, kind of like what they did with their first music video back in 2022. We also heard snippets of their new songs, which still have that iconic NewJeans sound. But this time, they're focusing more on the individual members themselves instead of marketing them as a cohesive group. From a marketing point of view, this all makes sense. But here's the real challenge. Because NewJeans already built a brand so disruptive, a lot of other groups are already following their playbook. So the question is, How do you reinvent yourself again? And it's also still unclear how much Min Hee-jin, the creative director, is involved in the next rebrand. Is NJZ gonna be the same way Apple is after Steve Jobs? Now I know it's mostly legal issues that I need to figure out, but in the chance where they can move on from all these legal issues, I have no doubt that they'll be able to disrupt the market once again. So whether you're fans of NewJeans or not, you're probably gonna wanna watch what happens next. And I'll also be keeping an eye on this rebrand, so subscribe to see what happens next. But there's one thing for sure, the impact that NewJeans had isn't going anywhere. They didn't just build a brand, they built a movement. And if there's one thing about building a movement from a cult-like brand, they never really stop.